Hello, everyone. I'm Ingrid Hartig, and I represent the Brainspring Educator Academy. I've been a master instructor here for many years, and I am thrilled to share this morphology webinar with you today. Joining me is my colleague, Esther Moreau, who will be fielding questions, any questions you may have in the chat. So let's get started. Welcome, and I want to thank you so much for your time and your attention to this webinar. If you could please, in the chat, let us know where you heard about this webinar. Was it in a newsletter? Was it Facebook? And this will help us reach out to so many more people. I'd like to begin with a Brainspring morphology overview. And I have several bullet points that I'd like to cover today. I'd like to start with a little bit of background knowledge, exactly what morphology is and why it's important in our teaching. I also would like to give you a very short history of the English language and how our language evolved. I want to then talk about the principles of instruction and a way that you can teach morphology in a very engaging way for the students to learn these Greek and Latin roots and affixes. And then I'd like to share some extension activities to help make your teaching even more productive and more fun for the students. Morphemes. Morphemes are the fundamental building blocks of the English language. Morphological skills enable their effective use in both reading and writing. Morphology is critical to literacy development. And research on children with dyslexia indicates that older students show more issues with morphology than phonology, or the sounds of our language. So explicit morphology instruction is advised. Now, morphology in reading. How morphology comes into play when we're teaching reading. Children typically learn letter-sound correspondences first, and they are encouraged to apply these letter sounds to decoding words. As the reading instruction ensues, then the words are going to become increasingly larger chunks. Morphemes impact word reading efficiency by carrying meaning which will support a direct pathway from print to meaning. Of course, our ultimate goal in reading is going to be comprehension, understanding the meaning behind words. And when students are versed in morphology, they can make that direct connection. When we are teaching using morphology, morphological awareness is a strong predictor of reading ability, vocabulary, and comprehension. A lack of morphological awareness creates problems with recognizing, understanding, and spelling words, which impacts comprehension. Students who understand words at the morphemic level are better able to understand the meanings of words. When we have a word, for example, like the word telephone, and students understand that tele means far and phone means sound, even if they've never read the word telephone before, they can apply these meanings to the word itself and understand, well, for this example, understand what that invention is. Now, in the study of morphology, we need to understand that the word itself, the word morpheme itself, is actually made up of, from the Greek morph, meaning form, and the French eme, meaning unit or sound. A morpheme is the smallest unit of language that carries meaning by itself. I had mentioned that children usually learn how to read by learning letter names and sounds first. Well, in this example, the letter B doesn't contain any meaning. It's simply a letter, but it carries a sound. And the same is for the letter S or any of our letters in the alphabet. When we study morphology, we want students to understand that we're combining parts in order to make longer and longer words, and when we understand those meanings, we can understand the meaning of the word. So what we're doing in morphology is we are gaining access and information about word parts. We'll be borrowing from what we call the Anglo-Saxon portion of our language, from the Latin and from the Greeks. Now, morphemes can be two different types. We have free morphemes, which we sometimes call base words. These can stand alone and carry meaning. The word hat, the word jump, or from the previous slide, the word dog carries meaning all by itself. So these would be free morphemes. Bound morphemes have to have another part. They have to be bound to another part of the word. So, for example, when we add prefixes to the beginning of words or suffixes to the end of words, then these word parts carry meaning, but only when they're attached to something else. Morphemes, roots, and affixes will enhance your reading instruction tremendously by carrying meaning with these parts to words that students will encounter when they're reading. Morpheme is the umbrella term for roots, prefixes, and suffixes, or base words, which carries meaning. In structures, our program for middle school and high school, we refer to roots and affixes as morphemes. Roots are morphemes, which carry the bulk of the word's meaning. Prefixes attach to the front of the morpheme and slightly alter its meaning, and suffixes attach to the end of the morpheme and slightly alter its meaning, and sometimes the word's part of speech. When we look at the word dog, well, we're referring to simply one dog. When we add that letter S to the end of a noun and we have dogs, now we're referring to more than one dog. When studying morphology, we want students to understand the meanings and the relationships between these word parts. So when we study or when we present a word like indestructible and we break it apart into its separate units, we teach students that in means not, means not. D means down or away. Struct means to build, and able means be capable of being. So the word indestructible means not capable of being torn down. Students will be able to apply the meanings to these separate parts to whole words in order to understand the word's meaning and gain much more vocabulary than by just rote memorization. When we're studying roots and affixes, this will improve their decoding. We encourage students to recognize meaningful chunks, like the root tele in the previous slide in telephone is going to mean far. We want students to be able to read these chunks very fluently. Students must gain fluency in order to get to the meaning behind the print. And then, as a bonus, students learning morphemes will be able to spell these incredibly long words that perhaps they may have been hesitant to write before. Their comprehension will increase tremendously because these roots will apply to many, many words in the English language. As I use that tele example, the root tele is used in over 101 words in the English language. And when students are able to read that root and apply the meaning, they'll know at least the partial meaning of hundreds of words in the English language. As far as English word origins go, you'll notice on my pie chart that most of the words on this chart will have a Greek or a Latin root. And so we need to encourage the teaching of these Greek and Latin roots in order for students to understand the bulk of our language. When we're looking at our language and the way that it evolved, you'll notice that we have different layers of language. The bottom layer is the Anglo-Saxon portion of our language. Then we have our Latin and Romance languages, and then we have at the top the Greeks. Now, the way our language evolved is with the Anglos and the Saxons, who arrived in Great Britain a long, long time ago. They were very simple people. They spoke shorter, concrete words, everyday words that we typically teach students in the early grades. Kindergarten and first grade, students are beginning to learn how to read, and we're going to present them with words that they probably will have heard of before just in regular everyday conversation. And they can make that connection with words they've heard of before to words that they're now seeing in print. Well, when we began to evolve into scholars, when we began to write textbooks and literature, we began to borrow from Romance languages. We looked toward the Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian languages, and we used their words to create these incredible textbooks and literature. As we became inventors, we then began to borrow from the Greeks. The Greeks at that point in time was the most advanced civilization, and we wanted our inventions to sound really important. So we would grab Greek roots and name these incredible inventions using these Greek roots. So what I'd like to do is to ask you to I'd like to ask you to take a look at this poll. Which level of the English language is typically taught in the early grades? Did I mention it was from the Latin, the Anglo-Saxon, the Greek, or all of the above? So which one did I describe as being used in the very early grades? And if you could please just type your answer into the chat, I'd appreciate that. The level of language, of the English language, that's usually taught in the early grades is the Anglo-Saxon portion of our language. Again, these are simpler, more concrete words. They're the words that make up most of the words we speak just in everyday conversation. When we are teaching Greek and Latin roots, it is important to approach Greek and Latin root instruction in a very multisensory way. And I have some tips and tricks that you may want to incorporate in your instruction. We recommend showing the new morpheme that you're going to teach to the students, whether it be a Greek and Latin root or a prefix or a suffix. We then suggest establishing a keyword. The keyword makes a connection to that root with a word that they probably will have heard of before and can connect to. We then include a multisensory activity for that keyword so students can be engaged in making those connections. And then we're going to link the morpheme to meaning. Again, morphemes are chunks that carry meaning, and this is going to be the point of our instruction, is making that connection to the meaning. We're going to have students practice writing this new root. That repetition will cement that root and its spelling into long-term memory, and then we should reinforce with the dictation of words. Now, I'd like to give you a brief overview with an example, with a sample root, and how we usually teach roots here at Brainspring. The first thing I would do is to show the root. So I'm going to write the root, in this example, the root micro, on a card, and I'm going to show it to the students, and then I'm going to ask them to brainstorm words for this root. Again, connecting the known or the unknown to the known, or vice versa. If I ask students, I gave them a clue, what's an appliance used for cooking quickly using small enough wavelengths? And of course, I'd want them to guess microwave. If I asked an item used to make a small sound louder, and I'm wearing one right now, that's going to be a microphone. So having a discussion about the roots, generating these words that students may have heard of before, using clues and cues, will certainly drive this instruction home. Once that introduction is over, you're going to establish a keyword. Now, the one we use is the word microscope, which students have probably had a chance to use in their science class. I'm going to relate using a multisensory activity. One that students really enjoy is where I will give them microscopic images and ask them to guess what these images are. Now, these images are so small they can only be seen in a microscope. So let's go ahead and try some. Here's my first image. If you could please just take a couple seconds and type into the chat what you think this is. For those of you who guessed mosquito, there you go. That is, okay, I don't like mosquitoes either, but it is kind of pretty. Okay, my favorite color is purple. There it is. But this is a mosquito under a microscope. Let's try another one. What do you think this is? Type it in the chat. This is a strawberry. I know, right? Once you know what it is, it really looks like a strawberry. And then I have one last one. What do you think this one is? Well, I'm sorry to say that these are eyelashes. Oh, okay. The kids they absolutely love this. They enjoy this guessing game so much. The whole purpose of this is to link the morpheme to the meaning. So I could write my keyword. In this example, it's microscope. I would have already taught students that a scope means to see or watch something. And I did mention that these images are too small to be seen without a microscope, leading the students to the meaning of micro, which is going to be small. In all of the words we generated, whenever you see the root micro, it's going to be small. Now, we do a lot of translations. If I ask students to translate the word microscope, I want them to know that it's small c. That helps us understand what the word means. I'll have students commit to memory by writing the root 3 times. Again, that repetition will cement that root and the spelling into long-term memory, and then have students make an index card for micro that they can use in the future to practice or to share with a partner. We strongly encourage reinforcing with dictation encouraging students to use this brand new root in their writing and recognize it in their reading. All right, folks, one more poll, please. Which skills are addressed when teaching morphology? Do you believe it's fluency, comprehension, spelling, or is it all of the above? For those of you who answered all of the above, that is perfect. Morphology addresses many skills that our students will need as they advance through the grades. A few extension activities which the students may enjoy. Have students find words in print with new morphemes or skills and bring them to class. Use morphemes or skills in writing activities. Have students compile a personal morpheme notebook with meanings and examples. Students use their own morpheme cards or can use their own morpheme cards to build many new words as they learn more and more morphemes. Challenge students to create new words using these cards, and you might want to create a classroom poster and ask students to add new words to it. Have students find words in print with new morphemes. Use new morphemes or skills in writing. Have students compile a personal morpheme notebook. And challenge students to create new words. One activity that I really like in the classroom is to give or to use these cards that the students created during the original introduction and to be building more and more words. You can create a classroom poster, ask students to add words to it, and create an interactive bulletin board where students can manipulate and create longer and longer words. Teaching Greek and Latin roots addresses decoding, fluency, spelling, vocabulary, and ultimately comprehension. It increases proficiency throughout their entire day. They will be encountering Greek and Latin roots and prefixes and suffixes in math, in science, in social studies, in art, everywhere they're reading. Teaching roots using multisensory strategies, making the information very engaging, sharing interesting stories, using pictures or visuals, color coding, and having students draw pictures to help these roots, meanings, these keywords really stick. Just a few final thoughts. The systematic, ongoing, and consistent integration of Latin and Greek roots into vocabulary instruction offers awesome potential for enhancing students' academic growth. We must work to make this happen so that we may also say, as Caesar once did on returning to Rome after a great victory, Veni, Vidi, Vici. Folks, thank you so much for joining me today for this morphology webinar. If you have any other questions, please pop them in the chat, and I hope to see you again soon.